our Sky News studios in Melbourne, live. The Bolt Report. Now, Andrew Bolt.
Now, for me, the issue here is not whether I like Lawrence Southern or Stefan Molyneux, like what they say, or whether I don't. It's whether I like having street thugs determine who may speak and who I may listen to, by threatening the speakers with violence while the police then charge them protection money. So, if thugs are trying to shut down speakers, I feel morally obliged to let those speakers speak. And so, here they are. Both Canadians, both with big internet followings. Stefan Molyneux, the host of Freedomain Radio, look it up on the web. And Lawrence Southern, who is touring her new film, Farmlands, what she calls the white genocide in South Africa. Thank you so much to you both. Now, let's go first. You're both on a speaking tour of Australia. What is it that you want to say, Stefan?
Well, I mean, the first thing I want to say is I sort of had this naive belief that here in Australia, as in most places, people pay their taxes, and in return they can lawfully assemble and discuss ideas with having police protection should things turn violent. The idea that you must pay in order to be protected twice, you know, you pay your taxes and then you got to pay again to be protected. That seems kind of silly to me. And it's not whether you're conservative or alt-right. These are just labels given to people who deviate from a leftist narrative. It's not that I'm alt-right. It's not that I'm conservative. I'm a philosopher, which means I examine things from reason and evidence, first principles upwards. That collides into the left's collectivism, it collides into the left's hysteria, and it collides with the left's addiction to violence rather than debate. And that's the thing that is so frustrating. If we're wrong, come out, give us good questions, give us arguments, write counter speeches, have counter meetings. We discuss things in a civilized manner. We don't threaten. We don't try and shut people down with violence. And appeasing these people, you think it's going to stop with us? It's going to keep going right to your doorstep.
I've gone through a whole list and I could have added more. Lauren, have you ever been presented in any other place you've been to with a police bill for protecting you from thugs?
Never in my life. The only place that I could say I've been more ridiculously treated is by the UK, and I'm banned from the entire country, so that's saying a lot. But this really does seem like an incentive to violence. Not only do you get to beat people that you don't like and attack them, but they're going to be oppressed economically as well. So why wouldn't people take the look at what happened to Milo and say, if we go and protest Fan and Lauren, they're going to get a huge bill as well. Let's protest the next people. Let's shut down the next event. So the police are, quite frankly, participating. They might as well be members of Antifa at this point. Just put on the masks and join.
Now, look, I've got to say here, you know, I know men and women on the street level of the police force, and they're the ones on the front line that have got to face these violent protesters. They know who the antisocial elements really are, and it's not you two guys. And they're doing a good job. They're risking safety to do it. It's their bosses I'm having a go at here.
Yes.
Now, but let's first go through what the left hates about you, and let's get that on the table. Start with Lauren. In 2017, you were detained by the Italian Coast Guard for trying to block NGO search and rescue boats for going around operating like a taxi service, picking up illegal immigrants from Africa and the Mediterranean, then bringing them to Italy. You said, no can do. Why did you do that?
Well, what people don't understand about the situation going on there is these NGOs were proven to be colluding with human traffickers. These were not migrants coming over. They were paying sums of 3,000 euros and up to come over to Italy and illegally sneak into the country. And these NGOs were incentivizing people to come out in dangerous boats that were definitely not going to make it to Europe and were potentially going to sink, and then picking them up, bringing them over, which was causing tons of drowning, giving tons of money to illegal human traffickers. And once this was investigated by the Italian government and also by the German government, there are now fines being brought down on these NGOs. The boats are being stopped by the current Italian government. All I did was go and protest. And yet you have leftists that are claiming, I drowned people, I murdered refugees, making things up out of thin air. And now I have the Italian government and also German government backing up what I did.
Before I get on to Stefan, and you've also been banned from Britain, as you said, for handing out leaflets in Luton that said, Allah is a gay god and Allah is trans. What was the point of that? That's provocative. I wouldn't do that. Why did you do that?
A little bit provocative, I suppose, but no more provocative than the people at Huffington Post or Vice who wrote articles claiming Jesus Christ is a gay man, Jesus Christ is a transgender man. No one batted an eye when that happened. These writers aren't banned from the United Kingdom. This was to expose a double standard where you can say all of the horrific things you want about the Christian faith because it is a faith that allows freedom of speech. It is compatible with Western culture, but you can't say a word about Islam. You cannot criticize Islam because the values of Islam do not work within the Western world. It is based on submission and oppression of speech.
And, of course, Britain, through its immigration policies, have created a great tinderbox in Britain so that you can't come with your tiny little
It confirmed
match.
my theory.
Well, there you go. Now, Stefan, you've had a lot to say about men losing power, about white genocide, and you once suggested, but you did apologise for this, I'm just putting it on the table, that homosexuality resulted from child abuse. It's just... Anyway, you apologise. Now what gets people really upset with you, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there might be a list of other things, is the links that you make between IQ and race. Why does that topic interest you so much?
Let me just clarify some of the earlier stuff. I've always believed that there's a biological component to homosexuality. I never made the argument that it's entirely based upon child abuse or anything like that. I wanted to be clear about that. Now, as far as IQ and ethnicity...
But you don't claim there's a link now?
I've never claimed that there's that homosexuality is the result of child abuse. So just want to be clear about that. With regards to the relationship between IQ and ethnicity, this is not my theory. This is basic science. This is taught in psychology courses. This is data going back over 100 years since IQ was first developed by the U.S. Army in the First World War to figure out who would be good officer material, who would be better on the front lines. So there are ethnic differences between, there are intelligence differences according to the IQ test between ethnicities. This is very well established. I have lots of experts on the show talking about this, going through the data and talking about some possible causalities. Whether it's genetic, whether it's environmental, remains a question up in the air, although I did have the editor of Intelligence magazine, Richard Hare, on the show recently. He was saying to me that by the time you're 18, 80% of your IQ is genetic. 80% of your intelligence is from your genes. And there's a wide variety of ways that they've managed to tease this out. This is just a fact, and we need to discuss this, especially when we're looking at mass migration policies, mass immigration policies. This is something we just need to discuss.
That's where people start getting, and I get very uneasy. I understand the work basically pioneered perhaps by Charles Murray in The Bell Curve with his co-author Richard Herrnstein. But they said they weren't sure whether this was environmental or whether it was genetic or somehow, and that's an open question. And when you start saying, hey, listen, one race might be smarter than the other, and let's base the immigration on it.
No, hang on. See, words from my mouth, I didn't say let's base immigration on it. This is something we need to discuss.
You said it had implications for immigration policy.
Well, it's one thing if it remains a rather theoretical question. It's another thing if you're going to start having immigration policies from various places in the world where the source countries have challenges with regards to IQ. Now,
you can understand why people would want to have your guts for garters.
Well, no, I think this is we need to deal with science. We need to deal with reality. We need to deal with what is in the world, not what we would like it to be. I'd love it if ethnicity was as irrelevant to intelligence as hair color. That would be a wonderful world to live in. But that's not the world we live in. We need to deal with facts. You know, cultures that turn away from facts, cultures that turn away from science, don't tend to do very well in the long run. We can't have this mass superstition of egalitarianism when the science tells us very clearly that that's not where the world is. So I don't have the answers as to what we should do with all of this stuff, but I sure know that we need to talk about the facts if we're going to come to informed decisions.
Your view on this, Lauren?
I am not a scientist. I haven't had as many experts on the question of race and IQ on my YouTube channel. It's not something I discuss. For the most part, I base most of my knowledge and communication off of on-the-ground reporting. I'll go to South Africa, I'll report on what I see. I'll go to the no-go zones in Paris, I'll report on what I see there. I don't feel that I am equipped to comment on this. Stefan, I know for a fact, has done a lot of research into this and has had the experts on, so I feel he is far more equipped to comment.
You don't feel that it's a sense of alarm, oh my God, because people think I'm racist if even sitting here listening to
No, in fact, I think it's rather silly that anyone is offended by the idea that we should inquire into this.
Oh, you haven't been in Australia very long.
Well, this is the very problem with people. We can't we can't just scream at Stefan and say, that's bigoted. We can't say that. That's horrific. No, prove him wrong. Tell me why we shouldn't talk about this. If your reason for not talking about it is it's offensive, that's not a good enough reason for me to not talk about it. So I'm interested. I'll watch his videos on the topic. I think it's fascinating. I'm just not an expert. I'll listen to the experts talk about it. So
you're proposing a radical approach here to prove him wrong rather than throw a rock at his head.
It's very radical. Very extreme.
Just from outside. But do you worry, Stefan, that when you're doing this, and I know that we should pursue knowledge, and that's what I've sometimes done to my cost rather than worry about the consequences.
Yes, I feel we may be in the same boat as far as that goes.
But do you sit there worrying and you see some skinhead with tats here and like that, and using this as an excuse, some meathead to go and be a racist, thinking I'm really smarter than these other people of different races, and I'll... Don't you worry about that?
There are things that I worry about. I will tell you what one of my biggest concerns is in this area, is that if there is a sort of star chamber or cadre of knowledge that is held by psychologists, by researchers into this kind of area, and it's kept very much in elite circles, right? So within the professional areas, they very much talk about this. This is openly discussed. It's part of the professional journals. And then there's this huge chasm between the expert knowledge and what is presented to the general intelligent population. This gap is a huge problem. Because what happens is people say, well, I've heard these kinds of rumors about this kind of stuff. They start looking into it. They find that it's true, but no one's talking about it. No one's discussing it. No one's bringing it to anyone's attention. And what they do is it alienates them from all of the experts who could help guide them to a productive discussion about this stuff.
You've got a large appreciation, perhaps exaggerated, I think, for the influence of the intellectual elite and on the masses. I don't think it works that way. And some of the people in the intelligent masses you're talking about are actually morons who will take that kind of stuff. I mean, we've got them. Some of them are called Patriot Blue. And that's what worries me. Lauren, about your film, tell us about that.
Sure. So I heard whispers online here and there that the Rainbow Nation wasn't working out as well as the media had portrayed it, that it wasn't quite this multicultural socialist paradise. And in fact, there were strong racial tensions that had manifested themselves in brutal, brutal murders of the rural white population. My prerogative is always, I'm going to go to the ground and figure it out. So I bought a couple tickets for me and two film crew to go down. We flew down to South Africa, and what we found there was shocking. We spoke to individuals who work in the crime scene cleanup industry. They told us that the murder of these white farmers not only was some of the most gruesome crimes you've seen on earth, children being boiled that were 12 years old, people being raped and tortured for days, but that they couldn't talk about the fact that this looked like it was racially motivated. They were too afraid to tell me this is racially motivated because we'll be fired from our jobs, we'll get in trouble. There is a government right now, they've got 11% of the vote, the economic freedom fighters, and they stand on stage and sing songs about shooting and killing the Boer people.
We've shown Malema, the leader of that, is actually doing that.
And not only that, but while I was in South Africa, I was thinking maybe this is exaggerated. Maybe it's not the whole government that's against white people. While I was there, they passed a law to take white land without compensation, just based on skin color. So it's not some crazy theory. It's not some alt-right, whatever label you want to put on it, documentary. It's just, this is factually happening right now. Whites are being targeted because of their race in crime, overrepresented in crime, and also by the government.
Not overrepresented in the general statistics, of course, because blacks are the biggest victims of murder in South Africa.
As white farmers, and when it comes to
farmers.
as farmers.
The thing is, I think, what is a trigger for some on the left is the phrase white genocide. Do you think that's a little over the top, given that there's plenty of people, including a couple of relatives of mine that are gone over there to work, that can live in South Africa without fearing that they'll be dead the next day?
Well, the genocide word to me is so powerful and refers, of course, primarily to the two big ones of the 20th century, the Holocaust and the Armenian genocide.
Some would dispute the Armenian genocide.
Not I. I've had another expert on the show who made a very convincing case for it. But anyway, So I think we don't want to overuse that word at all, and out of respect for the millions who died in the most horrendous, horrific circumstances that we can almost conceive of. So I don't think we should start talking about white genocide. I think we should, again, just talk about the facts. You know, Russia is taking, apparently, they're in the process, or I'm not sure how far along it is, of taking 15,000 farmers. They're offering basically sanctuary to 15,000 farmers. Now, each one of those 15,000 farmers feeds 2,000 people. What that means is that meals for 30 million people might be leaving South Africa. Now, South Africa was a huge exporter. I mean, the soil is fantastic with irrigation. It works really, really well. But it's become a net food importer because the farms are failing. So what is going to happen?
Look at Zimbabwe.
Yeah, what is going to happen when they run out of food because of this, frankly, communist, socialist, collectivist desire to do what Stalin did in the Ukraine, which is to take the farms away from the productive people, hand it out to your cronies, your friends, your political companions, and then have the productivity collapse, the food source collapses, they all flee South Africa, they head north, they head to Europe, they beg for food aid. This is a catastrophe, and it's being driven by this collectivist political ideology that we need to push back against.
Lauren,
Can I just jump in on the genocide point here? I know you said I talk about white genocide and my film is on white genocide, and that can be a great driver for views, but I actually do conclude the documentary by saying this is not a genocide yet. What it is it's on the path to be something quite horrific, though. And we never want to be at the point where we see another Rwanda, where people just ignored the signs, where we just looked back, and then we can all look in retrospect and be experts and say, oh, this definitely happened in retrospect. But we want to get there before. We want to try to stop things beforehand, and that's what this Farmlands documentary is about. It's about trying to warn people of all of the red flags that are showing right now that something horrific is happening.
Okay, with all the fuss about security and all that for you two guys, you've got a thing tomorrow in Melbourne. Melbourne is the worst city for this. If you get through this, you're okay for the rest of the country. This is my little word of comfort for you. Not very comforting, is it? What sort of security precautions have you taken?
We actually have wonderful security. I don't want to get too much into the details because, of course, that would be giving...
You've had to pay for your own?
Yes, we have our own security. Of course, the police have decided that they are being employed by us now as well, apparently. But we do have our own security. They're wonderful. I don't want to get into the details of what they're doing because there are people that are listening, do want to hurt us, and they want to know the details of it. They want to know where we're going to be. They want to know how it's going to be set up. There are threats, and there's some scary people out there. So I'm not going to give them the information that they want.
But it's funny. Because I can also tell, Stefan, in a way that the violence is a marketing tool as well, right? Let's face facts. The more we talk about people wanting to shut you down, the more that some people out there will want to see you, which is good. How do you deal with that? Do you court the controversy, which is a criticism from someone? Maybe it's not. Or do you think that the criticism actually illustrates the point that you're making?
Yeah, that's kind of
Machiavellian. The violence illustrates.
I know what you mean. I'm a simple man. This all seems very Machiavellian, like to what degree do we court controversy in order to do this or that?
And let me clarify. It's like with Milo Yiannopoulos, right? I feel with Milo, often what really speaks loudest is not what he says, but what is done to him.
So this is it for me. I think we have to be free to be able to speak the truth as we see it. I know, maybe I'm wrong about things. Of course, you know, we like to get that kind of feedback. But one of the reasons I engage with people all the time is to get that feedback, to refine, to reform, to sand down the rough edges, to make sure I'm in continual pursuit of the truth. We do have to have the right to speak the truth as we see it, not to advocate for violence, but to bring reason and evidence to the most challenging problems we're all facing as a society. Now, I demand to have that right. If people want to phone in threats, if people want to throw, you know, okay, I'm sorry that they want to do that, you can't back down. The one thing we learn from history is that appeasement always leads to a terrible outcome. Whatever you think is bad about standing up now, it's going to be 10 times worse if you don't stand up now, and I will not back down.
Good on you. What do I do with this bill for $68,000?
I think there's a rubbish bin, maybe in the other room. Oh, perfect.
All right. Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux, thank you so much for your time. And let's see how tomorrow goes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
After the break, the panel, Simon Breheny and Daisy Cousins. Don't miss them.